Hey guys, you're listening to Wingin' It with Holly. In this podcast series, I'll be sharing the fun and interesting things I've learned about birds since I started really noticing them 5 years ago. I'm no expert though, so along the way I'll be picking the brains of my knowledgeable birdie friends, the human ones that is, so we can learn and wing it together. You can see birds anywhere, in a city or the countryside, watching from a balcony or your local park. And I'm hoping these short episodes will help you notice and learn more about our feathered friends, especially if you have never taken the time to get to know them before. There are quite a few theories as to how the bright green parakeets that fly across London and other areas in the south of England got here. Did they escape a movie set? Were they released by Jimi Hendrix? And how has this non-native subtropical bird survived so well in the UK? In this episode, my cousin Katie and I discuss the ring-necked parakeet. Alrighty, so it is one of the most bizarre things to walk through a busy, built-up metropolis like London and to hear tropical parrots screaming overhead. So ring-necked parakeets are not native to the UK, but they have managed to adapt tremendously to the UK despite our weather and climate. So how and why are they here? That is the question for today. So I have brought my lovely cousin Katie, who works for a nature conservation charity as a wildlife advisor to the public. Hello.
Hello.
So we're actually in Hyde Park in London, so change of scenery for today's Wingin' It with Holly, which is often Brighton based. So Katie, I was wondering, do you often get queries from the public about ring-necked parakeets, and what kind of queries do you get?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think people generally send, usually the most common ones are, oh my god, I've seen a parrot in my garden, or I've seen a flock of 12 in my garden. And so generally it's the southeast that they're present. But yeah, it's generally people kind of a bit surprised that they've got this exotic bright green bird in their garden, and they're either worried it's a lost pet or or on the flip side, there are people who are basically, they come to their feeders, and because they're quite loud, they're brave birds, they're wondering how they can deter them. Or because they've got such strong beaks as well, they're looking for either a specific feeder for other birds that the parakeets can't use. But yeah, generally they are definitely a bird we get asked quite a bit, and
quite a bird of intrigue, aren't they? Because it is like I said in the intro, it does feel like quite a contradiction to sort of be in like a city, a built-up city, and then have this flash of bright green, fly overhead, and it just looks so different. No offense to our native birds, I love our wildlife, but they kind of just don't have that tropical look, do they? That exotic look, they don't really have that. So it is quite bizarre. They are, according to some research I did, they're the UK's only naturalised parrot. Yeah, so we're not really supposed to get parrots in the UK, basically. And they've just adapted really, really well. So in terms of what they look like, they're quite large.
Yeah, so in flight, they've got a really long tail, bright green, obviously, quite like a really rounded, chunky head, and quite pointed wings. They can definitely look quite unique in flight. So the males, when they're about at least 3 years old, they have a really dark line to the back of the neck, giving them that name. But actually the females and the juveniles, they lack that. So you can see them in kind of family groups. They're very sociable. So people who do see them here in Hyde Park, they will be different ages, varying ages. But yeah, that bright red beak, that green colour especially, is what you'll notice. And also they're loud.
They are. But they're quite striking. You can't really miss it. It's
yeah.
just so they often fly around in flocks, and apparently numbering hundreds at a roost site. They eat fruits, berries, nuts and seeds, which I understand is one of the reasons they've just adapted really well to UK life, and they can be a bit noisy. I mean,
yeah, there's no denying that any kind of parakeet is always going to be noisy. That's why people have them. So, you know, these parrots are popular pets because they can mimic, they can talk. So, yeah, they're loud. They're all parrots are loud. But so, yeah, where do they come from? Well, originally, they're actually native to the Indian kind of subcontinent and sub-Saharan Africa. So, yeah, they're well out of their range. But they just adapt very, very well. So like you were saying, their diet does help with that. So they can pretty much find food all year round. So although they look exotic, they can do really well. Our climate isn't too extreme in terms of temperature that they find it difficult. But there was a study in 2016 that did suggest that the original kind of European populations Robin. I just fed a robin from my hand. Basically the original European populations of these parakeets did originate from Asia. So that's why they look so exotic. But there has definitely been a rise, especially kind of like the last 10 years of sightings, people noticing them more, and they've also expanded a little bit further as well, and they've even been seen as far north as Edinburgh. So they are definitely
they adapt well. So they stretch. So in terms of where they originate from, stretch from West Africa across lowland India, south of the Himalayas. Yeah. So that kind of explains why, if they can sort of survive across Africa to the Himalayas, that in terms of the varying kind of weather that they'll get across that sort of
yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And like, because the UK can be quite cold, and so it kind of makes sense. Okay, well, if they can survive in the Himalayas, then they can deal with English weather.
Yeah, and I mean, it's the same with, if you look at things like peacocks are actually a Himalayan species. So when people see peacocks, which are feral here in the UK, they can be feral, they're quite worried about them surviving temperatures, but actually these birds they survive well up into the mountains, right. Like, you know, so they know what they're doing.
Is there has there been any sort of understanding of the impact of their presence, of the ringneck parakeet's presence, on our native birds?
Yeah, I mean, there's always that worry. People are always concerned, like the impacts the grey squirrel had on the red squirrel, that the same would be said for the parakeets because of their nesting habits. So they're nesting cavities within trees. People are concerned they would take over nesting sites for owls, for, you know, things like marsh and willow tit, etc. But at the moment, there's no real cause for concern from conservation groups. There's the government is obliged with any non-native species to monitor its numbers, and if there is a point at which, you know, scientifically and evidentially there is an issue with our native wildlife, with their presence, then action may look to be taken. But at the moment, there's nothing to suggest they're a real cause for concern. They just kind of have habituated, much like, you know, little owls. Little owls are not actually native to the UK, but have been here, you know, for quite some time now. So they've naturalised, and there's no evidence to support that they, again, create any kind of negative for our native wildlife. So yeah, there's always that risk with any kind of release, of whether that intentional or accidental, but at the moment it's nothing to be concerned about. Yeah.
Okay. And also, I guess, so in terms of where they've kind of adapted to well, in the UK, they sort of are primarily in the southeast of England, particularly London, Surrey, Kent, and Sussex, and they're all year round. So it's funny, they haven't really, like you said, you know, they have been spotted in Edinburgh, but they sort of are staying kind of
hub. The hub for them is the southeast.
I just find it so funny that London is part of that hub. It's like, okay. All right, so let's get into the sort of the classic urban myths of the different theories as to why how they got here in the first place. And it's quite funny because I think you kind of get a different theory depending on like which Londoner you ask, because there are quite a few theories. We know which one we think is makes the most sense, but we are going to just quickly go through a couple of theories which are often sort of stated as fact. So we can just I'll start off with the first one. Sure. So there was a rumor that they're here because of Jimi Hendrix. So apparently one day he was walking near his flat on Carnaby. Well, he had a flat near Carnaby Street in London, and he was walking down the road with holding a bird cage with two parakeets called Adam and Eve, apparently, and the rumor is he opened the cage and released these two, a male and a female parakeets into London, and off they went and basically created thousands from those two birds. So that's one theory, Jimi Hendrix.
Yeah. So another theory was that they escaped from the set of a film called The African Queen, which starred Humphrey Bogart and Katharine Hepburn. And they, obviously the title, they needed exotic looking birds. So they brought them to set in central London, and rumour has it they escaped from the movie set. But they were actually first recorded in the UK in 1855. Yeah. So I don't think Jimi Hendrix is that
dispelling all of our theories that we've just come.
But so yeah, I mean, there was also the theory that there was a robbing at George Michael's flat in London, and apparently it destroyed his secret aviary, and that also gave them an escape route.
Another one I've got here is that they fled Henry VIII's menagerie at Hampton Court Palace in the mid-16th century and somehow remained hidden for 400 years.
There was also one that, also again George Michael was arguing with Boy George, and they took flight from the apartment whilst apparently this row was being carried out.
What are the chances that it's two famous people?
Definitely some myths there.
Another theory, they escaped from the livestock transportation area of Heathrow.
Yes, I heard about that one as well. Yeah.
I've got one other one before the main one. There was the Great Storm of 1987.
Oh, yes.
I guess the theory is that, I don't know, that just meant some of them were able to escape. But basically, here's our theory, which kind of makes most sense just makes most sense, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Did you want to tell us, Katie, why realistically, why would they be here?
I mean, my personal opinion is escapees. So like I said before, they're popular pets. They mimic, they talk, they're pretty, and my personal opinion is that they did not naturally migrate to the UK, because
that isn't even one of the theories.
No. But the thing is that birds migrate for a reason, and they're not leaving. They don't leave here in winter, so they don't migrate. So there's no reason for them to have migrated in the first place here. So they are most definitely derived from escapees of some sort, whether that's Jimmy, whether that's George, whether that's Henry VIII. But yeah, they will definitely be domestic escapees.
So basically, people have had them as they've been popular pets since the Victorian times, and inevitably many birds have escaped or been deliberately released perhaps over the years. So basically, domestic birds, people have just had them, and they've got out and they've just adapted really well. I mean, that kind of makes no sense. But also, you're not the only person. It might be it's not just your sort of opinion. That's like generally nature conservation charities. That's the stance that they take. That's what it was.
Yeah.
So as fun as it is to sort of say that it was Jimi Hendrix or George Michael's or Boy George's fault, or even that it was a release from the film set, I think like the film set thing, surely there just wouldn't be enough to have been released for it to sort of have come from them.
And all these stories are only ever pairs.
Right.
It's like it can't just be one pair that like now 8,500 pairs derive from. So I mean we've seen them in Barcelona. We've seen similar looking, so monk parakeets, which, you know, from a similar area in the world. You know, I saw a few in Paris last week. So they are just city dwelling, like, and again that would have been due to escapees. I've seen monk parakeets in Malaga. So all these kind of cities around Europe definitely now come with the soundtrack of parakeets.
I'm just very impressed. They're very adaptable. So there you have it, guys. That's I mean, again, we can't, it's really hard to say this is fact, because like everyone is saying all of it is fact, but it makes most sense basically that it was the release over, you know, many years of accidental or deliberate releases of birds that have been kept as pets. I didn't know this. I'm not sure if this matches with the date you just gave, but apparently the earliest recorded sightings were in Dulwich in 1893.
That's insane.
So that's near where I'm from, Peckham, so that's crazy. And also in Brixton in 1894, and then a breeding pair were reported in Epping Forest in 1930. So yeah, I guess so. That's.
Also the thing about London and cities is that they have mature parks, so which is perfect for these birds to feed and also to nest as well. So, you know, if ever you're in London, go wander through a park, you know, just keep your eyes out. I'm sure you will definitely hear them. But even if you're driving past Heathrow, I tend to see them flying over the motorway. So yeah, keep a lookout.
Tell me what you like to do in Hyde Park when you're here, Katie.
I like to take an apple.
She's got one with her today.
Yeah, I like to take an apple from the local shop and pop it on my hand and give them a little treat.
They love apples, and they will literally come. And, so certainly here in the park, in Hyde Park, they'll come and take them from your hand.
Yeah. You look a bit silly when they're not on your hand, just holding up an apple. But I'm telling you guys, it works a treat, and it's a nice little snack for them. They'll come down, but just be aware of the babies. They are inquisitive, and I have had my thumb chewed a few times, which is a little painful. I'm not gonna lie.
I was just about to say you're basically like a Disney princess.
Yeah, totally.
But then if your thum is getting battered, then that's not quite the Disney princess image.
It was my fault. I was holding the apple all wrong. But yeah, no. It is fun to do and get to see them nice and close. They're beautiful. So yeah,
and it's kind of, you know, it's a nice addition to our our wildlife, whether they're supposed to be here or not. They've adapted well, and you know, they're not at the moment. They don't seem to be doing much harm. So I guess we can just enjoy the exotic addition of ring-necked parakeets. Thank you, Katie, for helping me dispel some some rumours and urban myths, and enjoy seeing them around, you guys. Thank you. Hope to have you on again soon. And goodbye. Bye. Thank you for listening to this episode. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and if you have any birdie questions you'd like me to explore in this podcast, you can get in touch via my Instagram @WingingItWithHolly.